Hello everyone and welcome to the UOW Digital Media Society's SIP and Photoshop event. We do apologise that we had some technical difficulties on the day, so instead of having an interactive event, we are giving you a recording which you can follow along with. So my name's Jasmine, I am the president of the UOWDMS and I am quite experienced in Photoshop. I've been using it for 6 years now, and I also have professional accreditations in Photoshop, which is a fancy way of saying I have done professional courses in the software. So today I'm going to take you through the basics of Photoshop. I'm going to take you through some keyboard shortcuts to speed up your workflow, and then we're going to do 3 projects together. So let's jump right in. What you can see on the screen here is opening up a new document. I wanted to go through this first because it's quite important to set up your document correctly so that you don't run into issues later on. So what we can see here is a whole bunch of suggestions that have come up. These are just recent resolutions that I have used. And what we can see on the right-hand side over here is an interface which actually allows you to customize your project. So up here you can enter the name of the project, and then you can change the resolution here, and you can actually switch between portrait and landscape quite quickly here. Now, if you're doing something where you're going to be making the same image in a variety of different resolutions, this is most commonly done for social media campaigns. You're going to want to use artboards. So you might be familiar with the feature in Canva where it lets you quickly resize things. This is like the Photoshop version of that. So I always tick this just in case, because you never know if you're going to need to resize your project. Now, what we've got here is different measurements. I usually just keep this in pixels because I work in social media, so I'm working in pixels. But if you're doing something, say, for print, or a client's asked you to use a particular measurement, you can change it here. Now, we've got RGB color. You can't change that yet. We'll do that later. Oh, and you can change the background content. So I would usually make this transparent. Just because you don't always want a white background, and you can always add in a background later. And if you'd like to save a preset, all you have to do is click this button up here, and it's going to ask you for a name. So just put random stuff in there and go save preset. Now this is going to live in your saved tab up here, and as we can see here, I have quite a few presets, and it's a good idea to save different dimensions that you might be working with quite often. So that is one way to open a document. Another way is to actually open a project. So as you can see in your project files, we've got 3 different projects today. We're going to open up the basics first, so you can just double click that Photoshop file, and that's going to open up in Photoshop. That's the second way you can open a document. The third way is you can actually just drag photos in. So if I drag this in, just make sure you bring it up where this tab is here. It's going to open up a new project for me, and it's going to keep the dimensions of that photo as they are. So depending on what you're doing, you're going to open your project one of those 3 ways. Now, what we see here is what we're going to end up with in a minute. It looks like a lot of stuff, but it's actually not too difficult. So I'm just going to make a new folder by clicking down here, and I'm going to hide this for now. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the basics to start off with, and I'm going to use this photo as our example. So I've just dragged that in. See how it hasn't resized the canvas here? We are going to need to scale this up. So you can do that by holding a corner and dragging it. And I'll just give you guys some hot tips here. So if you hold Alt while you do this, it's going to scale it up from the center instead of from the corner there. So this is a good idea if you want to keep it in a certain position, because then you can scale it up where it is. Now, if you want to skew it a little bit, you can hold Control while you do this. And this is going to allow me to skew it and change the perspective. Just going to go Control Z to undo that. But yeah, let's scale it up. And then we are going to click Enter when we are happy with that. And that's going to place the image down. When you add in a new layer, it's going to go to the top. So if you're using folders, it's a good idea to drag it into the folder and just check that it's in there before you start. So the first thing that we're going to go through is this tool at the top here. This is the Move tool. So this lets you select things, lets you move things around. And the shortcut for this one is V. If you ever forget the shortcut, just hover over the tool, and as you can see, Photoshop is pretty helpful and it will tell you what button to press to get this tool. These sets of tools here, they all do different selections. So this first one is just going to select in a shape, and if you hold Shift, it's going to make a square. So this is good if you just need to delete a big chunk of an image. You can right click this to change the type of tool you're using. This one's going to give you a circle. Again, same thing, it's going to do a selection, and then you can delete or color in whatever you need to with that selection. This one's the lasso tool. So pretty much you just draw like that and it's going to make a selection. But you've also got the polygonal lasso tool, and this one's quite useful. I often use this to make like corners because you can actually do nice straight lines. So I'll go like that and color it in if I'm doing a graphic for social media. And then this is my favorite one, the quick select tool. So you've got a few options here. The basic premise is Photoshop is going to try and predict what you're trying to select as you scroll over the image. As we can see there, it's having a bit of trouble with this image because it's quite complex and it's selected the whole thing. So actually that would be because I'm on a blank layer, so I'm just going to delete that. It'll work a bit better with the actual image. There we go. So as you can see, it's just grabbing onto what it thinks the boundaries of the object is that you're trying to select. But it doesn't do a fantastic job sometimes. So what I would suggest doing is going up here to select subject. Photoshop is automatically going to select the object in the image as best as it can. This is a lot better than what we just did. And then you're going to go select and mask up here. To change the color of this overlay, you're just going to go to color, pick whatever color you want, and change how opaque you want it. Basically, the purple is not being selected and the stuff that's in color is selected. So you've got a few tools. You've got the quick selection tool, which is exactly the same as what we were just using. So this is just going to allow you to refine those edges a little bit. And with all of these tools, you can hold down Alt, and that's going to start removing things as opposed to adding them in. And if you'd like to change the size of your brush, you can just hit the keystroke you see on the screen right now. So every time I've done this image, the feet have been a bit funny. So we're just going to do that. And sometimes it's really hard to select hair because there's some really thin strands in there. So in that case, you're going to go down here to this tool with that little flame on it. And you're just going to go over the hair and it's going to refine that edge a little bit for you. And we're going to do a little bit, actually maybe not, over the foot as well. And you do have some settings over here. So you can increase the radius or decrease it. As you can see, it changes the selection a little bit when we do that. I would always suggest smoothing out your selection a little, but when you start to feather, contrast and shift the edges, it can look a bit funny. So I'm not going to touch them today, but you can play around with them in your own time. The main thing for this part is the different ways that you can export it. You can export it as a selection and that's just going to stay as a selection, and then you can do whatever you want. You can export it as a layer mask or a new layer, whatever you like. For this particular project, I'm going to recommend exporting it as a layer mask. So what we did there is actually step 1 of our project, but it shows you how you can go through, and use those selection tools. So the next thing I want to go through is the text type tool. Hit the T on your keyboard to use this one. Click wherever you like, type in your stuff, and you should have the character menu up here. And we're going to use this a bit later, but I just want to make you aware of where these tools are before we start. Next one's the eyedropper tool. This one is one of my favorites as well. Use the I key to bring that up. Lets you select colors from the canvas. This is quite useful when you're trying to figure out what color to make your text if you're overlaying it on an image, and it's always a good idea to use colors that are actually on the canvas so it looks nice and cohesive. And next we have the paint bucket tool. This is just for filling in specified areas with a color. And if you right click it, you can get your gradient tool. Then we have our pen tool. This is going to help you create paths, and we're actually going to use this in project 3 later on today. And then down here we have our shape tool. Again, we're going to right click that to bring up the different options, and then you can just create shapes. We will be using this later, so we're going to come back to that. But as long as we know mostly where things are, you should be able to follow along. And just before we jump into this project, I just want to go over some shortcuts because these are really going to save you time. So if you'd like to zoom in, you're going to go Control+. Zoom out is Control-. If you'd like to select everything on the canvas, you're going to go Control-A. See how that comes up around the edge there? If you'd like to deselect your current selection, you're going to go Control-D. It's going to get rid of it. That's very useful when you're trying to select something and you might have stuffed it up a little bit. If you want to free transform an object, make sure that the layer is selected over here and then go Control-T. This brings you back to what we were doing before when we first pasted the image in, and then you can like resize it, you can scale it up and down, you can skew it using all of those prompts. If you'd like to undo what you just did, go Control-Z. Now, I don't know if I have this set up, but you can actually go and set up multiple undos. I might put up a short video on how to do that, but I think mine is still set up as Control-Shift-Z. No, I haven't set it up. I would recommend setting that up because it saves you a lot of time. We're also going to be using inverting today, which is Control-I. So this is generally when you're going to invert a layer mask because you might want to actually select the background instead of this person. So you're going to go Control-I and see how that just changes that selection there. Then we have duplicating. Select a layer, go Control-J. It's going to duplicate that layer rather than copying and pasting. And then some of the most common tool shortcuts that I use are B for brush, I for eyedropper, T for text, and X, which is going to switch these colors down here. So if I select our layer again, just say we actually want to refine this a little bit, but we want to use the black color. Hit X, it's now switched to the front, and you can use the black. So all of those things are just going to help you edit a bit faster because it saves you having to click things and go through menus to find things. Okay, so we're going to jump in to project 1. Now, we've already done like step 3 of that one, so we're just going to pretend that didn't happen. First thing we're going to do is we're going to place our background. So again, we are going to drag in this image. We are going to resize it. And I should mention as well, if you want to resize something, I've got mine locked so it doesn't go out of ratio, but I think the default setting is that it's not locked. So in that case, you may have to hold Shift to get it in ratio, but as you can see here, mine is actually the opposite. So that's another handy tip. Hit Enter to place that one. This is our background, and again, the layer's gone above our group, so we're going to drag that down. And it's the background, so it's going to go underneath the other image. Okay, then we're going to place our overlay, which is this puddle here. Cool, and that's pasted nicely for us. So I'm going to scale that up a little bit, and I'm going to turn the opacity down over here just so I can see what this ends up looking like. And that looks pretty good, so we're going to hit enter and place that one. Now, you might be wondering, how do we go from this to this nice blended image here? It's actually a lot easier than you think. So I think I actually made this a bit smaller. So I'm just going to scale this down and replace that. All we're going to do is change the blend mode. So blend modes change how light comes through your layer. So this section up here are the darker ones. So all the darker parts of the image are coming through. Then in this section here, we have our lighten options where all the light parts of the image are coming through, as we can see here. Then we have like some generic ones here. These ones are good when you're editing faces, which I might do in another lesson. And then again, we just have some different sections down here, but typically you're going to be using these top 3 sections. Sorry. So we actually want the light parts of the image to come through. So we're going to use one of these ones here. And you've just got to play it by ear and see which one looks the most natural. I would say lighten looks the best in this case. So once that's done, I'm just going to keep, sorry, now I keep pressing shift. I'm going to keep moving that around until I'm happy with it. And I think that's pretty good. So we're going to leave that there. Now, at this point, we would have pasted our lady friend in, and we would have selected her and put the layer mask on, but we've already done that before. So if you weren't following along in that bit, just jump back a little bit and follow what we did about 5 minutes ago. As we can see though, our selection wasn't fantastic. There's this black dot here. So we're going to get rid of it. To do that, we're going to click on our layer mask over here, make sure that's selected. Don't want to tell you the amount of times I've accidentally been painting on the layer and not the layer mask. We're going to hit B and get our brush up. We are going to increase the size of our brush. And then we're going to make sure it's on black, because black means that that part of the image is not coming through. White means that it is coming through. So as I color this in with black, we can see that that disappears. Cool. Now we are going to resize this a little bit, and I think that parts of the image might come through. Nope, we're good. And we are just going to put her sort of in ratio with the puddle that we just created. Beautiful. Now, this doesn't look very convincing because she's actually meant to be in the middle of the puddle, right? She's not in front of it. So we've got to create some optical illusions here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go Control J on our puddle layer. We're going to drag it on top of her. We can see that this starts to look a bit funny. So, quickest way to do this is we're going to go holding Control. We're going to select the layer mask of our girl, and we can see that this brings up a selection. Now with our puddle layer that we just copied selected, we're going to go down to this little flag looking icon and we're going to click it, and this makes a layer mask. Now with this still selected, we're going to go Control I and we're going to invert it, right? So this is actually opposite to the other mask, and then we're going to get our brush. Now we need the white, so we're going to hit X, see how that switches, and we are just going to paint some of the splash on top of her. Not a lot of it, but some of it. And you can refine this as you need by clicking X again to get the black brush back. And then I might even move her up a little bit. and that looks a lot better. We are almost done now, so we are going to hit T for our text type tool. We're going to click here. You're going to select the font that you'd like to use. So I think I used Azo Sans for this one. I'm going to scale that up before we begin and place it. And I think I wrote freedom in the back, which is a bit funny given the election that, the debate that happened today. Now, something I would like to explain with the text. We can change the font here. Adobe actually has something called Adobe Fonts. If you're looking for a certain type of font, you can click where it says all classes and go through these. So just say you want something that's handwritten, it'll bring up all your handwritten fonts. I actually think that one looks nice, so we'll use that. Here you'll have the different types, so it will say like bold, italic, light, whatever. You can select that there. Then you've got how big the font is, so you can actually click and drag this like a slider. Here is how much space is between lines, so you can space out your words vertically that way. And then here is your kerning. So this refers to how much space is between the letters themselves. So this looks pretty close together. So I'm actually going to bring that out a bit. And as you can see, as I do that, there's more space between the letters. And in the graphic design world, that is called kerning. And down here you have some more options, so I can make this extra bold even if I've already used bold font. Oh, I've spelled freedom wrong as well. That's not good. That's better. So because I've added in that extra letter, I'm actually gonna turn this down a little bit. But the idea is I'm just trying to space this so you can see most of the letters, because we're going to cut out where she is pretty much. Alright, now the different options down here is like italics. You can make it smaller, you can make it on top or below the other text, you can put an underline and you can put a strike through, and you might, depending on the font, have different options down here. If you've got a paragraph, you can click over to the paragraph tab, and change if it's centered or to the right or left, or if it's justified. This will just depend on the project you're doing, really. So I'm going to place that there. I'm pretty happy with that. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before, where we go Control, we select the layer mask. Ooh, but I don't like that one. We're going to deselect that with a Control D. There we go, that's better. And again, we're going to add a layer mask to this one. We can see that it's automatically done the opposite of what we want it to do, so we are just going to go Control I, and there you go, now it's behind her. And the reason I do a layer mask rather than rasterizing the font is that you can still edit the text, although it might look a bit funny if you start changing the size and stuff, but at least you can change the color and you can add effects to it and whatnot. So we might actually add some effects to this just so you can see how they work. So double click any layer, not on the name because then you'll rename it, but just in the white space over here. And this is going to bring up the layer styles. You've got a bunch of options here. So Bevel and Emboss is pretty much just going to give it a bit of a 3D look. This actually doesn't look too bad, so we're going to keep it there. Texture, you can add in different textures to it. They've got trees, grass, and water. Maybe water might be a good idea since we've got the water background there. Stroke is going to add a line around the text. Inner shadow is going to put a shadow inside the text. Inner glow is going to put a glow inside the text. Satin does this like weird, almost like a texture moment. I don't really use it too much. Color overlay. and gradient overlay and pattern. These are some of my favorites because if you need to really quickly recolor something, so like, for example, if you're trying to use a social media icon but you need it in your brand colors, you can drag it in here, go color overlay, and then pick your brand color and it will do it for you. You can do the same thing with a gradient and a pattern. Then you've got outer glow. So this is going to give like a glow outside. And you can change the settings there. And then you've got drop shadow. This is one I use quite a bit because it's like a subtle way to make things stand out. This one looks pretty good. So we're going to go with that, and you can always check what's happening over in this panel here, and it's also a live preview so you can see what it looks like on your image. Then go OK and you'll see it come up here. So if you ever decide, oh wait, I don't want the bevel and emboss, you can just click off the eye there and it goes away. But I think it looks pretty good. Alright, so that's the first one done. Congratulations if you've been following along. That concludes part 1 of our SIP and Photoshop event. Please keep watching for parts 2 and 3.